Hello everyone and welcome back to your weekly news recap. We are your hosts Jacob Smith
and Matt Morgans,
here to get you up to speed on the past week in gaming so that you can head into this week all caught up. And Matt, we've got some interesting streaming news, and it's not our typical Streamlabs reports either. It actually has to do with a particular streamer. The particular streamer in question is Ninja. One of the biggest streamers in the world, the biggest Fortnite streamer in the world, has announced his official move from Twitch exclusively to Microsoft's streaming platform, Mixer. He did so in a press conference style skit, obviously very scripted, obviously highly produced in partnership with Microsoft, and talked a lot about getting back to the roots of streaming or whatever that means. But we all know he got a big fat oversized check.
Yeah.
Comically oversized.
The sort of trailer style thing really cemented that, because there's no way that came solely from Ninja.
Oh, no.
Microsoft was definitely involved there.
Especially because there was a Red Bull sponsorship. Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, there's definitely money changing hands in this thing. But I'm sure this has got to do with Mixer's growth recently. I mean, Mixer is way behind YouTube and Twitch when it comes to streaming, but they have been growing very steadily in the last few quarters. Particularly in the last quarter, they had a big jump. And I think Microsoft is maybe taking streaming a little bit more seriously. They're putting a bit more resources behind growing Mixer, and bringing in a really big name like this is I'm sure going to have a big effect on the platform.
Definitely helps. It can't hurt at the very least.
No, I mean in the last report that we got, the last quarterly report from Streamlabs, they published data for the very first time on DLive, which is another streaming platform that up until now hasn't released data. And it was revealed that basically DLive has swooped in and stolen the number 3 spot from Mixer. And the suspicion is that the vast majority of their performance is coming from the fact that PewDiePie uses it as his exclusive platform. I don't think there's a ton of growth going on elsewhere on that platform, but that one big name has really helped them to get ahead of Mixer very quickly. So this may also be an attempt to kind of get back up the rankings.
Sure thing. I mean, you look at Ninja's most recent Mixer stream, and it broke the number of view counts that his most recent Twitch streams had been doing previously. And granted, the hype has a lot to do with it, but that just shows that the numbers are out there. And that if they can keep this hype trend going, then they can build up some serious steam, forgive the metaphor.
Yes, certainly. And certainly if the move convinces other content creators to start shifting from Twitch to Mixer, or at the very least just to start streaming on multiple platforms, then I think it could be very good for Mixer. It'd be very interesting to see what impact this has on their quarterly growth when the next report comes out in a few months' time.
Yeah, well, and I've seen a lot of people in the industry, in the streaming community, both streaming communities, kind of speculating that this could be Microsoft trying to gear up for the next big console release. As we know, Xbox Scarlet will be debuting holiday 2020 bundled with the next Halo. And so, right, you kind of see where I'm going with this. If they get a big name like Ninja to start streaming Halo, at least occasionally, can drive up some numbers, especially given his crowd is the young kids, typically, right? The ones who are going to be asking their parents.
If they're going for more direct streaming integration on the next console, and if they're really focusing on making Mixer easily available on their next console, they definitely want to improve the public perception of Mixer as a platform.
So this is a big move. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, and given everything they've presented at xCloud, their big focus on streaming and cloud services at E3, it was a big part of their presentation. I think that this could absolutely be where they're heading. But if they're going to get anyone on board, Ninja is the one to do it right now. I mean, he was the first esports star to be featured on the cover of ESPN ever last year. So he's a big name, a household name, and a recognizable face.
although he is a big name, it's worth noting that the last streaming report really showed that there isn't one standout kind of top streamer. The top streamers kind of month by month were really shifting around, and that's really been the case for the last 2 quarters, but particularly in the last quarter. There were about 10 to 15 major streamers who were all kind of jockeying for position. And Ninja actually was not even in the top grouping of that. But you know, obviously he's still a very, very important figure, and certainly he has a lot more name recognition than some of these other top streamers, you know, who are very well known with their own audience, but don't necessarily have a lot of reach outside of that.
Yeah, no, it absolutely, you know, even if he doesn't have the top spot in views or in streams, it certainly speaks to his cultural impact more than anything else. And I think Microsoft knows how to tap into that really well.
Certainly.
So we'll see. I mean, kudos to Ninja for making this, you know, obviously huge money move for himself, because he is probably living quite happily right now.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll see what the future holds for Ninja, for Mixer, for Ninja on Mixer. But Matt, we've got some awesome, really cool, actually very surprising news regarding Borderlands 3 and its status.
Yeah, Borderlands 3 has, as of last week, officially gone gold. So development on it has effectively finished. The game's done. I mean, no doubt the developers are going to continue working on it in terms of bug fixing and things like that. But yeah, as for like core development, it's all done, which it's not unheard of for games to kind of go gold very far before release, but this is definitely earlier than normal. Most games tend to go gold within a week or 2, maybe up to 3 of release. This is like a month and a half before release.
Yeah, it's no small feat for sure.
Yeah, this may explain why Gearbox has been so aggressively marketing the game, because you know, if the game had been at risk of a delay, and they'd invested all of this effort into marketing and then had to come out and say, oh, we've had to delay the game by 3 months, that wouldn't have looked great. And it would have also meant a lot of wasted money with marketing. But if they knew that the game was, you know, going to be ready ahead of schedule, it might explain why they've been so gung-ho about their promotional efforts.
And that kind of goes in tandem with the news about them going gold, because that is obviously going to boost the amount of people searching for Borderlands 3, or hearing about Borderlands 3, and then so they see these new Vault Hunter trailers and details coming out, then they're going to be enticed to kind of find more about the game. Like it all goes hand in hand really well. It's a smart move by Gearbox, and I got to congratulate them. Like you said, this is really early on for a game to go gold. It's not typical, right? It's not unheard of for us to hear of games going gold, you know, a month, sometimes a month and a half, sometimes 2 before release, but it's not common, especially with big budget, huge AAA games.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but an impressive move for sure.
Yeah, and also this last week, they've finally released, as you say, trailers for the actual Vault Hunters. The trailers themselves don't reveal a whole lot. They're mostly just short sort of character trailers. But alongside those, they did release a lot of information on the game's site about those Vault Hunters and how they're going to actually work in game. And that's really the first official information we've had about the new skill tree system and how action skills are going to work in game. So there's been details released so far for Mose and Zane Flint, and then Amara and Flack are going to be next week, probably around the same time. So what we know basically is that if you've played Borderlands before, is that this is going to feel fairly similar.
What? I wouldn't have expected that one.
Each of the Vault Hunters is going to have 3 skill trees, like they have had in the past. Really the big difference is that you're not just going to have one big ultimate ability. If you played Borderlands 2, you'll know you had your big skill trees, but then you basically just had one big ability, and you could probably change how it worked, but you weren't having more than one. In Borderlands 3, you're going to have a separate action skill for each skill tree, and you can equip up to 1 at a time, typically.
Yeah.
Although that's how they described it, and then so far the 2 Vault Hunters that they've shown have like completely different takes on that. So like Zane Flint has 3 skill trees, each with their own action skill, but he can actually equip 2, and supposedly he's the only one who can do that. Except that if he equips the second, he has to give up the ability to throw grenades.
Interesting.
But yeah, his 3 action skills are creating like a personal barrier, creating a clone of himself, and summoning a drone. And then the other way that they kind of change this up with Mose is Mose actually does have just 1 ultimate ability, which is summoning her mech, but then the skill trees have separate action skills which change the armaments that the mech has. So like 1 skill tree gives it a minigun, 1 gives it a grenade launcher, and 1 gives it a railgun. And then again, like it alters depending on what skills you have. So I would suspect that Amara and Flak are probably going to have slightly different systems as well. It looks like they're not just sticking to one rigid template.
Yeah, I like that. I like that, again, like you said, because we expect to play the same game, or essentially, a familiar experience at the very least. But to see Gearbox be able to innovate on the mechanics already existing, it's impressive, right? I think a lot of studios, a lot of big series, fail to do that or struggle to do that at the very least. I think another game that is kind of shifting toward that is Call of Duty Modern Warfare, where they're kind of taking similar aspects of the franchise, well-known aspects of the franchise in previous, and elaborating on them in a different way. And so I think that this is a good sign for Borderlands 3, that fans will see more of what they like, as well as awesome innovations on the different classes, different systems going on. It's really cool to see. It's awesome. I love seeing that dedication by Gearbox to their franchise, because they could easily keep pumping out the same experience, but they're not.
Well, yeah, not quite the same experience. Similar experiences.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's kind of what we want from Borderlands, right? Is like
I don't think anyone's looking for like a completely revolutionary experience from Borderlands.
No, I think that would detract from what the series is known for a lot, and I think releases are infrequent enough as to where you can have those same mechanics, have people wanting to come back for those similar mechanics at the very least, but then be able to make subtle changes to make it feel like a very different game, along with, of course, a completely revamped story, new characters, villains, all that fun stuff. It all goes hand in hand, right?
Yeah, certainly.
But what I think most interesting about Borderlands going gold, more than anything, right, is the idea that that they don't have to crunch till the last minute, right? I think that's such a prevalent practice.
Definitely going to help.
Yeah, absolutely. And like
I don't know if we're going to see like a multiplayer beta or anything like that, like recently got announced for Modern Warfare, but I wouldn't be surprised if the devs over at Gearbox take the opportunity now, between now and release, to basically look at things like multiplayer servers and make sure that everything's stable going into launch. Because a rough multiplayer launch can really sting in terms of the game's lasting reputation. Yeah,
that's very true. We've seen it time and time again. And with a primarily multiplayer game, that would be pretty detrimental. So why sit around twiddling your thumbs when you can do something?
I'm sure there'll be bug fixing and doing all of that.
Absolutely. I think, we'll see a lot of improvement. I guess we won't see the improvements, but I think the effects of the game going gold so early will be felt in a very polished experience. I mean, that's what I hope from the exactly that's what we all hope. No one's hoping for a bug-ridden mess. I mean, this isn't that's the title, but but I digress. We've got to move on now to some less fun news, much less fun news actually. There was a big leak that was revealed on Friday, August 2nd. Yeah, and it's E3 big, because E3's official website apparently contained a link that opened a document, a spreadsheet, with the names and personal information of every attending journalist at the conference, at the whole event.
More than journalists, of course.
Yeah.
It was journalists, YouTubers, influencers,
all attendees,
content creators, as well as investors and financial analysts who were attending with official passes.
Yeah, over 2,000 attendees. Information was leaked over, and of course, the Entertainment Software Association has removed the link, and people are still looking to hold them accountable, of course, because once you put something on the internet, it never goes away. I mean, once one person gets a hold of it, there's no telling what they can do with that information. Of course, all of that information has ended up on forum after forum, and no matter where it's taken down, it, like a hydra, will always rear its head once again.
This is definitely, I think, something that's going to have a long tail, that we'll be hearing about this down the road, and hopefully it just doesn't lead to anything really bad. We've heard already of people getting prank calls and things like that, and hopefully it doesn't get any worse than that. But this is definitely going to make life irritating, I'm sure, for a while for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, and we've seen, like you said, a lot of highly publicized journalists come out and say that they and people that they know have already started receiving harassment, and even as minor as it is right now, there's no telling where it can escalate. And it's an unfortunate situation all around. People are questioning, the credibility of the ESA, of E3,
Definitely.
and how people are going to trust the organization and the event again.
This was definitely a case of negligence from the ESA. I mean, there's no way at all that this document should have been so publicly available. And the ESA's own apology really glossed over that fact. They just say, unfortunately, a vulnerability was exploited and that list became public. And then they went on to say that they provide a media list on a password-protected exhibitor site, but they don't actually say in the apology, except that there wasn't actually a password, and you could just open up the media list, whoever you were. Somebody at the ESA made a really big mistake, and I hope at least that it gets dealt with internally. But so far, I don't think they've endeared themselves in the way that they've handled this to the people affected, because it certainly seems like they're trying to kind of brush this under the rug so that they can hopefully deal with this internally, but I guess we'll see. But of course that lack of communication doesn't do well when you've revealed the public information of thousands of journalists and people who have public forums who are going to go out and say this is unacceptable.
Yeah, certainly public pressure will make it much harder to handle strictly internally, especially because E3 is the single biggest gaming event of the year. Wonderful. But seriously, I to any of those affected, our condolences, because this is like, no one is trying to make light of this situation at all. It really is a serious situation, a serious breach of not only information but trust. That information, that personal, very intimate information, is secure.
Certainly. I mean, neither of us were affected personally, but we do have staff here at VGR who did attend E3, and this does affect a lot of people. This isn't just affecting the huge media sites. This is down to individual content creators, YouTubers, bloggers, things like that, who applied for press passes to E3. And trusted the ESA to keep their information secure. Yeah. And that has not been delivered.
No, certainly not. But Matt, let's jump from a one shady leak to some more severe industry shadiness. I won't even bother with an introduction. Matt, you take the reins on this one.
Yes. So if you've paid even a little bit of attention to gaming news in the last sort of 10 years, you've probably heard that GTA 5 has done pretty well for itself.
Just a bit.
I mean, the game's made billions in profits and continues to be highly successful. It's GTA Online is still one of the most streamed games. I think it's in the top 5 maybe, or just outside of the top 5 for most streamed games on any given quarter. And so you might be surprised to learn that that Rockstar North, the studio that was principally responsible for developing GTA 5, hasn't paid corporate tax in the UK for 10 years.
Oh.
Which, basically, this is not necessarily new information. I mean, a lot of this was probably available and just nobody did the digging. But a new report has come out from TaxWatch UK, which is an investigative think tank that exists here in the UK and basically monitors the way that corporations deal with tax and how whether they're paying it, for one.
The important stuff.
And they put out this big new report on Rockstar. So if you're unaware of the way Rockstar is structured, basically Rockstar Games is the publishing branch that kind of owns Rockstar, and that's US based, but Rockstar North is their principal studio and is actually a lot older than Rockstar Games. They started as I forget their names because they started, I think, back in the 90s. The studios in Scotland.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
And that's where they developed the very first GTA. And shortly after the first GTA was very successful,
that's right, yeah.
Rockstar Games was established, and they changed the Scottish studio's name to Rockstar North to fit in with the overall brand. And of course, Rockstar Games is owned by Take-Two Interactive. So specifically, Rockstar North, the studio in the UK, has not paid any corporate tax. And to be clear, they've not broken any laws here. This is entirely the case of them exploiting loopholes in the tax system to just avoid paying tax. And there's definitely a discussion to be had about the UK's tax laws and how basically lax they are when it comes to enforcing corporate tax. And unfortunately, that's something that needs to be dealt with by the government, and it's just not being dealt with.
Yeah.
But this story does unfortunately get worse. So, obviously, Rockstar has made billions. They made literally over £1 billion, that is, in their first 3 days after launching GTA 5. And between 2013 and 2019, their operating profits have been around £4 billion. And this report found that the vast majority of that has gone directly to senior staff in terms of bonuses. $3.4 billion of their profits have gone directly to senior staff bonuses. And there's a great quote from the report that they said, Take-Two appears to believe that it's reasonable that close to 100% of the profit should flow to their US-based parent companies and senior management, while almost no profit flows back to the UK companies involved in either making or selling the game.
I mean, this just gets sketchier.
I mean, these are not bonuses that are going back to devs. These are going to corporate executives higher up the ladder. And what makes things worse is, while all of this is going on and they've not paid any corporate tax, the report really highlights the fact that Rockstar North has claimed £42 million in tax relief. That is, taxpayer-funded tax credits as part of a government scheme which was set up in 2014, and that scheme is meant to provide financial support to the UK games industry. And since this scheme was set up, they immediately pushed GTA 5 into this scheme, even though the game had already made billions by the time the scheme was set up. And since then, Rockstar North has claimed 19% of all the relief that the scheme has provided to the entire industry. And the UK games industry, if you're not aware, is actually a very big industry.
Oh yeah.
And it is a very it's an industry in the UK which has a lot of growth in ways that a lot of other industries in the UK are not growing, because they have a very different market to a lot of other industries. it's honestly, it's one of the only industries that we've got at the moment that's like really booming.
And Rockstar's just sucking that dry.
Yeah, and Rockstar is siphoning away tax credits paid for by the British taxpayer for a company that's not paying corporate tax at all. They're claiming tax relief back, which is so infuriating.
So essentially, what we're seeing is the British taxpayer directly putting money into the pockets of those higher up executives, already multi-millionaire
100%.
Billionaires. I mean, and like, unfortunately, wow, this is, I mean, layers shadier than I think anything I've seen in at least recent years. This is not an uncommon practice. We've seen companies like Activision, EA lay off, dozens, hundreds of people, and then give multi-million-dollar bonuses to newly signed executives. Like, this is, and of course,
there's a big question as well as to how they were able to get so much money out of this scheme, because to qualify for this scheme you have to submit. The scheme is basically based on games, not development studios. So Rockstar North is claiming back the money based on GTA 5 and potentially other games that they've made. But to do that, they have to pass a cultural test, which is administered by the British Film Institute, and that basically establishes the contribution to British culture that the game represents. And this is like a 31-point test you have to pass and get at least 16 points. And they don't publish what the figures are for things that have passed this test, so we don't know how well GTA 5 did.
Well, that's why I laugh, because it's GTA 5. I mean,
it's like it's set in essentially a fictionalized California. I don't know if there's any British characters in the game. I'm not aware that there are.
2, and they're weird celebrity stalkers. I don't think that necessarily contributes to the culture.
No, I don't think so. So I mean, I can't imagine it scored that well.
No,
but yeah, the report from TaxWatch UK notes that it's outrageous that the UK taxpayer is being asked to shell out tens of millions of pounds in subsidy to the developers of Grand Theft Auto, when at the time that the game's developers put in their tax credit application, Grand Theft Auto 5 had already generated several $1 billion in sales and profits. And then in a rather clever little nod that you don't really expect from an investigative report, they said, "This is a drive-by assault on the British taxpayer and corporate welfare scrounging at its very worst."
Absolutely is. This is just absolute highway robbery. I mean, this is just deplorable business practices in its essence. Directly, like you said, siphoning money from an industry that could really use that money from smaller studios, from indie studios.
There are a lot of indie studios in the UK, and they are doing some really good work and coming up with some really good games. And this scheme was meant to be able to help them, and instead it's being drained away by Rockstar, who have absolutely no need for it. They're generating far more money than they're getting out of this, on profits alone just from GTA 5, which came out years ago. GTA 5, they don't need this.
I mean, is not only the most profitable gaming IP property ever in the history of gaming. I believe it's the most profitable entertainment property.
I believe
ever
so, yeah.
In the since its release 5-6 years ago. So that just speaks to the volume of which Rockstar does not need this money, and yet they're taking it, and they're putting it in the wrong places too. That's what's the most frustrating part, is they're not
obviously
taking this.
Obviously, this report is coming from an independent investigative watchdog, essentially. So they don't have any power to kind of change the rules here. Mm-hmm. But they do recommend at the end of the report that the government here in the UK take a very serious look at how they're allocating tax relief on this scheme, and make sure that it's going to people who actually need the money and not these. Rockstar is clearly the big offender here, but there may also be other studios in the UK doing similar things, very large companies who are taking advantage of the scheme, maybe because it's not being monitored closely enough. So hopefully, the right people take a proper read through this report and see what's going on, and make sure that money is redirected. But I guess we'll see whether anything actually changes in the next few months.
I mean, the report is not only calling on the UK government to do something, but this American right here is calling on the UK government to do something. Matt, make sure this gets to the right people. But on that rather sour note, we're gonna end. We gotta wrap things up. Thank you so much for tuning in today. You can find links to these stories and more all at VGR.com. As usual, we're constantly looking for ways to improve the podcast, so if you've got any feedback or any topics you'd like us to cover next week, please let us know in the comments down below. Once again, I've been Jacob Smith.
And I've been Matt Morgans.
We do not endorse shady business practices. We'll see you next week.
No.